Supreme Leader, let me explain to you.
You've lost me.
This is the missile in...
From the depths.
You push the button. Boop.
Literally anything.
No! Why? Nuclear winter.
Hello, every dude, and welcome to Talking Shit Building Ship. I'm your host, Spud Cubs, and in this episode, we'll be finishing the destroyer from the last Talking Ship Building Ship. So far, we've built the hull, main guns, and aircraft elevator. Now, we can install the internals, defenses, and details, so we can get it uploaded to Steam Workshop for all of you to enjoy. Sorry for the large gap in uploads. I've been really working my corner lately, trying to make rent. I do have good news, though. I'll be getting a new laptop soon, which will let me edit on the go and stream again, meaning more videos and more streams for you guys. Now let's get this video off the ground and into the water like a North Korean missile. Speaking of missiles, the missile update came out and is going to be the main focus of our conversation for this video. Seriously, we're about to have a full discussion up in here. The recent rework to missiles has changed the entire game and how it's played. Shields no longer dominate combat, stealth is now relevant, jets and carriers now populate the meta, and FTD feels a little more like a strategy game than just a clunky physics sandbox. So how did a simple missile rework change the entire game? Well, before we get too in-depth, let's take a look at the new missile parts first. The new remote guidance part allows missiles to track directly to wherever the AI or player is aiming. Each remote guidance missile requires additional AI processing power to properly function. The remote guidance part can go anywhere on the missile, making it very strong, as thumperheads can be used to create extremely fast and powerful missiles. Because the target of these missiles is a single point in space, it is very important to have reliable and accurate detection systems on board. By not using standalone detection, remote guidance missiles cannot really be countered by flares, nor sonar or radar decoys. Thus, the new AI signal jammers have been introduced as a way to counter remote guidance, in exchange for engine and processing power. Fins have undergone some notable changes as well. Now, fin force is based on leverage, i.e., how far away from the center of mass they are placed. This means that if you want maneuverable missiles, be sure to place fins in both the back and the front of the missile for maximum turning force. However, missiles in general are not as maneuverable as they used to be, making fast, agile aircraft very useful against missiles, since they can't really be hit. Various minor missile parts such as one-turn and APN guidance now have empty space that can be allocated for more fuel, health, or firepower. This is an interesting addition because it essentially allows for extra missile functionality without any major drawbacks. New hatch blocks allow missiles to look cool and be protected. No more exposed vertical launch systems, naked torpedo tubes, nor unprotected missile turrets. Remember, use protection. New rail blocks allow easier mounting of missiles to flat surfaces, such as aircraft wings. These rails not only provide an alternative to traditional launch pads, they're also extremely aerodynamic. And since the launch rail holds missile parts, it's a good way to fit more missile in less space. One drawback, however, is that you cannot attach ejectors to rails. When I first heard rail missiles, I was really hoping they would be missiles able to be shot from a railgun, like Metal Gear. Anyway, the behavior of the Stagger Fire add-on has also changed so that you can now single-fire missiles instead of having to release a full volley. You can actually set how you'd like the missiles to launch in the controller menu. You can single-fire missiles, volley every missile you currently have, or have it set to wait until all missiles are loaded before firing. Before we continue, I'd like to bring up 3 additions that could make missiles even more fun and versatile, without breaking the game. Maneuver thrusters could make missiles more maneuverable at the cost of fuel. They actually added maneuver thrusters to the game while I was writing this, so I'll just pretend I got through to Nick telepathically. Ion thrusters can make missiles useful in space or as submersible missiles, but at a major penalty to speed. Missile paint could simply add another layer of weapon customization and could be useful for indicating different missile types. If this does get added, it should definitely be separate from the paint on the actual missile gantry though. Now, consider all of the new features and changes. So far, we've seen a major buff in missiles' long-range capabilities, versatility, and overall ease of use. But we haven't even gotten to the best part. There are now 3 different sizes of missiles. Yes, you heard me correctly. We now have these 2x2 mini missiles. Their launch pad counts as a gantry as well, allowing you to fire fully functional missiles using just a controller and a launch pad. Then, we have the medium missiles. This is what we're all used to. They're kind of like the forgotten middle child of the missile family now, though. Finally, we have the mega missiles that take up a 2x2 meter area and are absolutely destructive. They do so much damage, they've brought more traditional from the depths nukes to near obsolescence. Each missile size has different lifespans. The mini, medium, and mega missile sizes have a base lifetime of 10, 20, and 40 seconds respectively, which of course can be increased with regulators. Missiles have also received changes to their normal stats. Missile parts now cost a fortune to build and take twice as much ammo to reload, but do a ton of damage. As I see it, these are more changes to pull missiles towards being a high-risk, high-reward, strategic weapon, to be used only when needed. Any wastefulness when using missiles creates huge ammunition problems very quickly. So what does any of this mean for gameplay? And why has it had such a large impact on game balance so far? First off, missiles have been balanced to be more useful as long-range anti-ship missiles, due to performance shifting towards low maneuverability, high health, and high damage. Being of lower speed and maneuverability than previously, the new missiles are less effective against fast targets, especially very small, agile aircraft. Secondly, missiles are supposed to be used sparingly, evident by their high ammo costs and high resource costs. However, there is still a major factor missing from the game that really can create missiles and weapons in general as strategic resources. We'll talk about that later in the video. But my third point, missile rails have enabled more aerodynamic missile setups, enabling planes to carry larger payloads at higher speeds. Small, fast air units can avoid missiles and accurate detection with quick maneuvers, making small jets almost impossible to counter at medium to long ranges. So, let's touch base really quickly on these 4 points. 1. Missiles are now specialized anti-ship weapons that can hit hard and from very long range. 2. Less is more when it comes to missiles. 3. Aircraft can now carry more missiles with less drawbacks. And 4. Small, agile aircraft are extremely powerful because they are almost impossible to take down. So essentially, missile-equipped jet aircraft are the new dominating force in the game's meta. Speaking of meta, let's briefly explore what will happen to the in-game meta because of the missile update. Just like in real life, direct engagements are a thing of the past. Guns and armor mean nothing if your opponent can hit you from beyond your engagement range, and with more force than practical armor can defend against. Since fast aircraft can quickly deploy into a fight, deliver large missile payloads, and retreat to refuel, rearm, and repair before the enemy can even react, aircraft are now an even more important unit than ever before, since they essentially extend the effective combat range of high payload missiles. Aircraft carriers will be the best capital ship setup due to the new strength of aircraft. Aircraft carriers provide a mobile landing and supply zone for aircraft, further increasing the range at which payload can safely be delivered. Aircraft-equipped fleets can safely strike hostile targets with little to no risk to any fleet vessels. As well, direct combatant vessels such as battleships have become mostly obsolete. Large-sized missiles are more effective overall than nukes. In this regard, nukes have become at least partially obsolete. The only advantages nukes hold over mega missiles is speed and standalone detection, since custom jets can go faster than 200 meters per second, and targeting cannot be duped by countermeasures. So from all this, we can draw that the new missiles are supposed to act like important strategic weapons. So how exactly did Draba handle making them feel more important? And why does his method fail at this? What could be done to make missiles feel as important as their combat stats reflect? To answer the first question, Draba drastically increased the resource cost of missile parts, as well as an increase to missile ammo cost per reload. This makes spamming missiles incredibly impractical, because of how expensive each missile gantry is. I get where Draba was going with this though. Missiles are supposed to feel more important, so you'd think inflating the cost would mean having to use better and fewer missiles, as making a lot of missile parts or having to repair broken parts would be very costly. So why does this fail at making missiles a strategic weapon? Why does combat still feel like a rock throwing contest? It is because, just like guns, missiles still cost nothing to fire and reload. They are completely free.
But Spud Cubs, missiles definitely cost ammo to fire. How can you sit there and say they are free?
Yes, the ammo cost of missiles has increased, but ammo regenerates infinitely. You can never run out of ammo. Hence, you can never run out of missiles. The only limiting factors of missiles are the initial construction cost and the time it takes waiting for them to reload. The initial construction cost increase is not a good way to go about this because it doesn't affect cost on a per missile basis, or even a per battle basis. This method only inflates the costs for craft carrying missiles, not the missiles themselves. Once you have one missile, you have them all, since they can costlessly regenerate via ammo storage. I have a few changes in mind that could potentially fix this problem, as well as make From the Depths feel like a more competent strategy game by making ammo conservation and efficiency relevant to gameplay. I propose a small wombo combo of changes. 1. Return the cost of missiles to normal levels. 2. Remove ammo regeneration completely. 3. Have missiles retain reload state in and out of play instead of automatically replacing the missile when put into play. And finally, 4. Change ammunition processors to be larger, more expensive systems similar to fuel refineries that can produce ammo either in large volumes or very efficiently. I actually think that last change should be applied to more than just ammo, but that's a topic for a completely different video. Anyway, back on track. What effects would these changes have to the game, and what makes them so necessary? In short, these changes would put more emphasis on permanent bases and supply units, incentivize small specialized vehicles, reduce long fights, and introduce a progression system to the game. Let me explain. Making ammo production large and costly would bring much needed importance to maintaining a well-defended base where you can gather resources and refine those resources into ammunition. This way, forts, structures, and defensive play overall makes at least some sense in campaign gameplay. As a result of reforming ammo production to be more facility-focused, the need arises to be able to bring fresh ammo to your units and fleets. Dedicated supply vehicles would serve a greater purpose unless you want to pull your fleet all the way back home after every fight. This creates the need for a spending balance between military, supplies, and defenses, since all three would be crucial to gameplay. If a fleet does run out of ammo mid-fight, it would essentially end the fight, since one side would be completely defenseless. This makes it important to be as efficient as possible with your weapons. Instead of creating boats with every possible gun and missile setup, the system would incentivize smaller, more specialized vehicles that perform specific tasks using the least amount of ammo, fuel, and resources. Pulling a craft out of play and putting it back in automatically refreshes each launcher and gantry with a fresh missile. By removing ammo regeneration and automatically refreshed missiles from gameplay, fights would generally be a lot shorter, since a craft would no longer be able to fire weapons literally forever. There would be a limit to combat capabilities for every craft. Removing missile refreshing would also mean exploiting hit and runs would be less plausible, since one would have to actually reload. Currently, you could fire all of your missiles, exit the fight, immediately re-engage with a full complement of missiles, and repeat as much as you like. This change would counteract such an exploit. A major reason to push for these changes is that it would introduce a sort of progression system into the game. By having to manufacture ammunition, the player would need a constant supply of resources. If a player is out of resources, they will run out of ammo. Because of this, the size of the player's military is directly dependent on resource income. Also, reducing the cost of missile parts back to normal would shift emphasis from which weapons you build to whether or not you can support those weapons over time. What this all means for gameplay is that the player cannot simply start the campaign and save up for a battleship to fight the Deepwater Guard. There wouldn't be a proper amount of ammo production, leaving the battleship completely inoperable. The player would have to start small and build up from there, earning resources by capturing zones and pillaging enemy fleets and cities. Because there are only two ways of getting more resources, players are left with two clear strategies. Your first option is offense, pillaging enemy fleets and cities, and it can be very rewarding, especially when capturing before scrapping. But your own forces will most likely be expending ammunition in the process, and it gets more and more difficult to capture enemy forces the further into the campaign you are. There's also the possibility of losing fights that you are unprepared for. This means you really have to gauge whether or not a fight is worth it, instead of just flying in headfirst and dealing with the consequences later. The other option is defense, just building up and having natural income and growth. Units are likely to be repaired, well supplied, and near defensive fortifications. But this style of gameplay is slow and often just flat out boring. Although it's very low risk, it's also very low reward. This makes offense much more viable when you are doing well, and makes defense better when you are getting beaten back a bit. I think this creates a good pacing to the game, making you and the game have to adapt to each other. An additional change that would supplement such a gameplay environment would be making each sector the player owns contribute to a small resource multiplier, making it important to hold your territory and have regular patrols, instead of just waiting around for hours. It also gives players short-term goals, incentivizing territory expansion, instead of just rushing down each faction's headquarters. Furthermore, making all these changes would make the difficulty of the game a strategic challenge, instead of an explosive pissing match. Not only would you need larger units later on, but you need to be efficient and creative with how you handle enemy fleets. Brute forcing the campaign would lead to resource hemorrhaging and eventual failure. As a final note, because of the risk of losing fleets or having to retreat, these changes would make various aspects of defensive play more important, such as defenses and extra resources, fuel, and ammo kept in reserve. These simple changes have the potential to change how the entire game is played, and would push from the depths more towards being a strategy game rather than just a so-so vehicle sandbox.
But, Spud Cubs, wouldn't these changes break all current designs?
Actually, these changes wouldn't affect the current game's designs very much at all. Many designs have ammo processors on board, similar to old fuel processors before the fuel engine rework. These could just be left on and slowly phased out. Some designs don't have ammo processors, but they still have ammo storage, meaning they just have less reloads before they can no longer fight. Remember, ammo storage on board is only used when reloading guns or missiles.
But, Spud Cubs, these changes would make the game, too complex.
We already use this exact system for fuel refineries. You have to produce fuel from raw resources and have it supplied to your fleets. If anything, making these systems more similar would make the game easier to understand. But, Spud Cubs, wouldn't this make energy weapons too powerful? Not at all. Fuel and ammo are resources. Their alternatives are either less powerful or much more expensive, making the game fairly simple to balance. Other implications of these changes would include further shifting the meta in favor of carrier groups, hit-and-run tactics, and defensive play. Keeping ammo conservation in mind, more efficient weapons would become more important than more DACA. And because of a need to constantly be mining resources and producing ammo and fuel, it becomes more important to pick what engine system is going to be running your base. Steam and fuel take up resources and turn it into engine power. These would be useful for cheap temporary bases since they would consume more and more material over time. RTGs and electric engines cost much more and don't require additional resources or fuel to produce power, making them a better choice for permanent bases. Anyhow, diverging a bit, let's talk about some other stuff. Included in the missile update, the damage vignette was also removed from the game. Now you don't go blind when you get hurt. Also, you can now choose whether guns will fire at high or low ballistic trajectories, meaning you could set them to fire as a normal gun, or like an artillery piece, like a mortar. I've also deleted most of my old or outdated workshop entries so that it's easier to find the currently functional craft. When this video is published, 3 new craft should be uploaded to the workshop shortly. And that's the Destroyer you see right now, the new Super Hawk VTOL aircraft, and the Corgi I never uploaded to workshop. Also, what the hell, Nick? I've been asking for changes to painting to make it easier to use, like naming colors and displaying which color ID a block is. But instead, you patch in this new color palette that makes it near impossible to see what color you're even using. Stop. Get some help. So, every dude, that concludes the insane ramblings of yours truly. What do you think of the new missiles? What do you think of my proposed changes? Let me know in the comments section, or on Twitter, or join my Discord and scream at me in voice, so we can open a discussion. That's all I have for you this time. Subscribe for more From the Depths Meme Supreme content, and have a buoyant day.
Why? Why?